What's up, people? Hello, and welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the Cup Chasers podcast. This week, we focus on a manager who proves doubters wrong. A manager who is turning heads and flying high, a relatively unknown quantity for most when he arrived in the Premier League. If you don't know how to pronounce his name yet, you certainly will now. Of course, it's Big Ange Postecoglou in the spotlight of the week. The Tottenham job has been known to bring winning managers a black mark on sterling records, but Ange Postecoglou has the backing of those who know and love him, of those who have played for him and worked with him. From his days in South Melbourne to his time with the Australian national team and his adventures in Japan, having led him to Scotland and the green and white of Celtic, Postecoglou is a no-nonsense manager with conviction and heart, the kind of heart that Spurs have shown thus far this season. Big Ange actually played for South Melbourne his entire playing career, racking up 193 appearances in 9 years. He was also eligible to play for the Socceroos, which he did 4 times, because his parents moved to Australia from Greece when he was 5 years old, meaning he was eligible to play for the national side. In 1989, South Melbourne would hire Frank Puskas as the coach, an absolute legend of Hungary and, of course, of the beautiful game itself, but not a legend of speaking English. However, he did know Greek at the time, and it would fall to Mr. Postecoglou to be interpreter and translator in practice, locker room, and on the field. They would go on to win the title just 2 years later in 1991, but 3 years on from that, Big Ange would be sidelined like so many others by a horrific knee injury. South Melbourne were actually more than happy to let Postecoglou stay on as the assistant manager, and the head coaching job would be his in just 2 short years. A slow start, something that has been a hallmark of Postecoglou's coaching career, was followed by 2 back-to-back league titles. Of course, success begets success, and they won the Oceania Club Championship in 1999, which would set up a berth into the Club World Championship, the Club World Cup as it's known now. And of course, who else would he have to face except Sir Alex Ferguson and the treble winners of Manchester United? Now, they obviously did not win that game. Lots of chopping and changing for Sir Alex Ferguson, but it still resulted in a 2-0 victory for Manchester United. One David Beckham would actually feature in that game. Now, as far as South Melbourne goes, Ange Postecoglou is an absolute legend, being the only player, coach, person, to feature in all 4 of the club's league titles. In their entire history, they've gotten 4 titles, and Postecoglou was a part of every single one of them. 2 as a player and 2 as a manager. His success at Melbourne would obviously catch the eye of the Australian national side, and he would spend the next few years working with the under-17s and then the under-20s respectively. Unfortunately, at this time, he would feature on an Australian national television show where he would have a heated debate with one Craig Foster, former player for the Socceroos, and this would end up being a black mark upon his coaching pedigree, making work hard to find for Mr. Postecoglou for a few years. During this time, he took a job in the 3rd division of Greece, and then afterwards would help out a friend at semi-pro level whilst also working on coaches' badges and running coaches' clinics in Australia. 2009 rolled around, and the Brisbane Roar came calling. Despite another slow start to his time at Brisbane, they would end up going 36 games unbeaten and win 2 back-to-back league titles. making Big Ange Australia's most decorated manager of all time with 4 league titles to his name. After another local move back to Melbourne for a season, the Australian national team was ready for him to lead the senior side. He would take the helm for the 2014 World Cup, a memorable tournament which I've always felt the Australians got quite the raw deal. Drawn against Chile, Spain, and Holland, they played well in all 3 of the games, but still lost, giving up many goals. 3, I think, in fact, in each game. However, Timmy Cahill would score one of the greatest World Cup goals of all time, a volley I'm sure you remember, and I certainly do, as I've watched it over and over and over again. An absolute beauty. Next year's Asian Cup was a success for Big Ange and the Socceroos, as was the qualifying campaign for 2018 and the World Cup in Russia. However, just 2 weeks on from clinching qualification, Postecoglou would resign, citing the infighting and general political environment that had taken over the Australian national team and the goings-on in the back office. And he was out just months before the World Cup. Now it's December 2017. Ange Postecoglou would be invited to take on a new challenge, moving to Japan and the Yokohama Marinos. They conceded tons of goals that first season, finishing 12th, but they also won the Japanese League Cup. And then the next season, of course, he became the first Australian to win a Japanese title, as the Marinos would go on to take the league. Just a few years on, it's June of 2021, and the Giants, Celtic of Scotland, had gotten wind of Mr. Postecoglou. They just lost their first title to Rangers in 10 years, and were actually looking to get Eddie Howe, but would have to settle for Postecoglou. No one had any idea who he was, and it was a bit of an inauspicious start for the Aussie, who, in his very first game, was tasked with qualifying for the Champions League, and they would fail to do so against Danish side Midtjylland. It would be a torrid start to the season after this failure, but one that Postecoglou would reverse, as with 1 game to spare, they won the Scottish League, and they would go on to lift the cup that season as well, winning the Scottish double. It would also make Big Ange the first Australian manager to win a league title on European soil. He would go on to win the Manager of the Month award 5 times, and he would also win the Manager of the Season. That brings us to last season with Celtic, where they would do one better and win their 8th domestic treble. He would mark his final game in charge with a precious win over big rivals Rangers. Ruthless, he's been called, tactically daring, relentlessly demanding, with a no-nonsense attitude that's led to success in nearly every post Postecoglou has held. It's all led up to his appointment in North London for his biggest challenge yet. The likes of Antonio Conte and Jose Mourinho have struggled mightily at Spurs, and many are wondering if Postecoglou will turn out the same. It is worth noting that these doubts have been typical of the Australian's career, and he's ticked off every box and answered every question that's been asked of him in every post he's held. He is doing that and more in the Premier League this season, with his nonchalance in the pressers and the free-flowing football on the field. He's certainly got the Spurs fans fired up and welcoming all challengers, but it's a long season. It feels like Tottenham have finally found a manager they can get behind, someone who they back for the long term, someone who's here to stay. Sky's the limit for the Australian, and it's all looking up at the moment. Can Postecoglou finally end the trophy drought at Spurs? Only time will tell. Well, thanks for being here, people. Thanks for listening. This has been the Spotlight of the Week. Go ahead and get the likes up on the videos. Subscribe if you're new. Once again, as I said, thanks for being here, and you will see me next time.